In struggle and love, we need to tell everyone there is more than enough. Talk about working folks, war and peace, hungry for honesty, hope and release. Trying to stay alive until I die. I don't ask for guarantees, but I need high fidelity.
All in favor?
Nazi party
All right, it carries unanimously.
opening up the camps, the gulag.
At the chair and other board members.
I make the motion to rescind the board's prior decision to expel functionally Paul DiRienzo from the board.
Critics of Brown also point out that his many unsubstantiated assertions and factual errors undermine the confidence in the station and make it more difficult to raise funds. WBAI programmer Mimi Rosenberg spoke out against Brown's attacks.
Whether it's characterizations about apes or towering black men that conjure up the most vulgar images that were propagated in the birth of a nation and are still rooted in our body politic, whether it's jeopardizing an individual's livelihood, libeling and slandering the organization, demeaning it, driving away donors, indeed coming up with statements that are actionable, definitely prima facie case of defamation here.
Even Patty Heffley, a former member of LSPROG and still a strong ally, said,
First of all, I will say that I find Steve Brown, many of his statements to be completely insensitive, and they are rather offensive to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons.
Bernard and I talk about the magic moments we shared together over the years of Wake Up Call.
Welcome to the Battle for Progressive Media. Those were scenes from previous episodes. The Battle for Progressive Media looks at battles by progressives to maintain and create new media operations. We also examine some stories ignored by the mainstream media. This fall, we've been focusing on a crucial election underway for the local station board at progressive radio station WBAI, part of the Progressive Pacifica Radio Network, founded in 1949 by anti-war activists in Berkeley, California.
Since then, the network has grown to stations in Los Angeles, New York, Houston, Washington, D.C., with nearly 100 affiliate stations that carry one or more programs produced by the network. I'm John Riley, a part of the Out FM Collective, which produces a progressive lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender show on WBAI.
And I'm Margareth Dominique, a producer with Haiti, The Struggle Continues, also on WBAI. This show is not connected with WBAI in any way. Tonight we'll be looking at two candidates for the local station board, Father Lawrence Lucas and T.B. Brooks. They are running with the Justice and Unity campaign, a multiracial, majority women slate, working to maintain the station's activist, anti-racist focus. Then we'll examine the business history of multimillionaire and board re-election candidate Steve Brown, leader of ACE, or the Alliance for Community Elections, a mostly white group which is highly critical of the station's current mix of programming. Finally, we'll hear more about Justice and Unity's proposal to bring more radio channels for the station to air. First, Father Lawrence Lucas explains why he's running for the board.
Well, I think I could bring a lot of experience to the local station board. I have been on for the last 3 years, but I've been a long time not only listener but supporter of WBAI. I don't think that there's been any fundraiser that I haven't pledged $300 to $400, and I'm not rich like Mr. Brown. Justice and Unity candidates are the only serious ones about helping WBAI and helping it to grow and to reach out and to give the kind of information that you only get on WBAI. And the second half of that, which is a negative part of that, that I want to overcome what is the so-called white liberals of less proud, who seems that they have only one agenda. Well, they had two at one time, namely to get rid of Don Rojas and now to get rid of Bernard White as program director. As a board member, I owe several contributions I would like to make. First, to assist in its, not only its programming, but in its outreach. And then I want to make WBAI more widely known than it is. And then for those who are listeners, I would like to get a larger number of the listeners to also become supporters and not just be beneficiaries of the freebie that you listen, you get educated, but you don't want to. For what happens on WBAI, when you look at what a credit today costs in the average college, I think they're getting the greatest bargain that is available today in terms of education.
T.B. Brooks explains why she is running for the board.
Well, I want to strengthen the current board and give some of my positive energy because I share the current board's worldview of activist programming, anti-racist programming, and pro-affirmative action programming. I would be very proud to be part of this board. I have a vision of making it a piece of the movement. I've already signed up with the outreach committee, and I have a little plan to go to different movements and show them for only 7 cents a day, each of their members can join WBAI. Because BAI is actually the voice of the movement. You know, like we say Mumia was the voice of the voiceless. BAI is the voice of the movement. Where else can anyone who's organizing a demonstration mobilize tens of thousands of people in New York City to turn out? We've often said, you can't organize a demonstration in New York without BAI. Doesn't matter how many leaflets you give out, it works. BAI works. If I call in with a hot news item about a change of Mumia's case, it's on the air. Anyone else, people are organizing domestic workers, people are organizing on Puerto Rican political prisoners, it gets on the air. You hear that first. Lynn Stewart's case, how else could she have mobilized all the people who turned out to influence her, that judge, except through BAI?
This year's WBAI Local Station Board election campaign has been dominated by charges from a group of candidates endorsed by ACE who allege that the decline over recent years in the station's paid membership at the station is because many former subscribers are upset with WBAI's programming, which they say includes shows that are, quote, anti-white, close quote. Among the ACE endorsees are 3 local station board members seeking re-election: Stephen Brown, Carolyn Burden, Paul DiRienzo, and defeated former board member Alex Steinberg.
Candidates of the Justice and Unity campaign counter by saying first that ACE has never documented the charges of, quote, anti-white, close quote, programming, but rather that the real concern appears to be programs by and for the survival struggle of communities of color. Justice and Unity further maintains that WBAI's financial problems have many sources. They note the decline of support for public broadcasting as a whole, the devastating impact of 9/11 attacks on the local economy, and rising rates of area poverty and unemployment. All of this at a time of rising rent, utilities, and employee costs.
Beyond that, Justice and Unity members say that the public campaign of harsh criticism of the station by ACE-endorsed board members, which they say defames the program director and alleges all sorts of wrongdoing without substantiation. Further, the Justice and Unity campaign says that the constant parliamentary maneuvering of the ACE grouping has disrupted board proceedings, slowing down efforts to expand membership and to get vital committee work done. Rigid insistence on Robert's Rules of Order and a nasty tone on committees generated by the ACE grouping has led to a decline in membership of committees. But the Justice and Unity campaign has the beginnings of a recovery plan, which involve increasing membership by going deeply into the progressive community.
Candidates from the Justice and Unity campaign are troubled by a 3-year-long negative email campaign during which board member Steve Brown sent more than 60 messages with many distortions about the station. He has frequently sent messages to a list in his possession containing thousands of WBAI listeners.
Brown's harsh emails have been repudiated by the local station board, which passed a motion of disassociation last March because of the racially inflammatory content, unsubstantiated allegations, defamatory calls for firing of program director Bernard White, and even outrageous statements such as what the board termed a call for violence against Bernard White. Quote, "You should have been at her side, whacking Bernard with a baseball bat," close quote, and a statement that Mr. White's actions are worse for WBAI than those of, quote, "Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush combined," close quote. In 2000 and 2001, when WBAI was taken over by pro-corporate forces from the Pacifica National Office, Brown was involved in the movement to reclaim the station, which formed a broad umbrella group called Concerned Friends of WBAI. But Brown was a member of a small group within that larger movement that some say acted in a factional way, passing around their own separate sign-up lists at large movement meetings, creating confusion among listeners present, and then refusing to share those lists with the larger movement. This effort amassed the names and email addresses of thousands of the most ardent WBAI supporters. Ray LaForest talks about the likely source of Brown's email list.
Well, from the very beginning, on hindsight, even before we got the station back, it became clear that Steve Brown and his allies were obsessed with taking over the control of the station. So while the rest of us were still fighting to wrestle the system from the cool people, they were going around at every meeting and collecting signatures, sometimes under false pretense. I was witness personally to a meeting in Lower Manhattan where when finally took the station over, where documents were given to people to sign, letting people believe that that information was being given to WBAI, and when it was only going to be for this group.
The WBAI Local Station Board, on which Brown sits, passed a resolution against his constant email attacks. WBAI Program Director Bernard White speaks to what he believes is the impact of Steve Brown's emails on the station's fundraising.
These emails that go all over the country and to our listenership do just that. They don't close WBAI down, but it does begin to eat into our ability to sustain ourselves.
Candidate T.B. Brooks, a member of the Justice and Unity campaign seeking election to the local station board, discusses the impact of Brown's conduct.
Steve Brown has been engaged for the past couple of years in special listserv emails around Bernard White and other people on the station, denigrating them and, in fact, attacking them and inciting other people to take action against them. And I think this has had a very destructive kind of effect on people feeling close to the station. I mean, yeah, they tune in for the information, but you mentioned BAI and they have images that have been evoked by Steve Brown's emails asking people to whack Bernard White with a baseball bat while he talks to somebody else. And there are all kinds of really disgusting images that Steve Brown evokes that makes people feel they don't want to hang out at the studio.
Many people receiving Brown's email ask, who is Steve Brown? We'll try to answer part of that question in today's program.
This past February, the New York Times ran an article about the Château des Tombes, an 18th century French mansion that was disassembled in France and reassembled in Long Island in 1927. The article went on to report that its current owner, the very same Steve Brown, had recently put the home up for sale and was asking $7 million.
Brown's official candidate statement says, quote, "For 25 years, I owned and ran one of America's largest and most successful marketing firms, whose annual revenues exceeded $300 million, close quote. Earlier, Brown had acknowledged his company was Direct Marketing Enterprises, or DME. In 1988, a New York Times article discussed DME. Quote, "Its owners, Stephen Brown and Jerry S. Williams, each received a salary of $500,000 and had dividends of up to $13 million, according to public documents filed in 1986, close quote. The article, titled Consumer World, Mail Order House of 100 Names, went on to say, quote, "Raffoler, also known as Direct Marketing Enterprises Limited, uses different business names for most of its 100 product lines. That practice has helped turn Raffoler into a $200 million a year mail order powerhouse with a trail of legal trouble decades long." Raffoler specialized in low-cost items including watches, cheese, dolls, and rabbit ears. The company's names include... The Times story continued. Raffoler had many brushes with the law. Attorney generals in Minnesota, Kansas, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Ohio have investigated, filed suit, or forced the company to halt various business practices in recent years. The Federal Trade Commission in 1986 issued a consent decree under which Raffoler, without admitting guilt, paid a $150,000 penalty and agreed not to violate mail order rules, close quote. The article discussed a lawsuit filed by the New York Attorney General's office. Quote, "Elizabeth Bradford, an assistant attorney general, said last summer in a complaint filed in the state Supreme Court, quote, having shown themselves incapable of making an honest sale or a consistently timely delivery, they should not be permitted to conduct any further mail order business in the state of New York, close quote. The complaint accuses Raffoler of deceptive advertising, selling shoddy merchandise, misrepresenting merchandise, running illegal lotteries disguised as sweepstakes, and violating mail order rules for the timely shipment of goods, close quote.
Co-owner Jerry Williams responded to the suit. Quote, "In court papers, Mr. Williams said the charges were, quote, unsupported by facts or evidence," close quote.
But 5 years later, Raffoler had to pay the Attorney General's office a fine of $175,000. Board candidate Tibby Brooks of the Justice and Unity campaign explains.
A couple of years later, in January of 1992, UPI issued a release based on statements from State Attorney General Robert Abrams, then State Attorney Bob Abrams, about Steve Brown's mail order company agreeing to reform itself after being severely penalized. One of the country's leading mail order companies has agreed to reform its sales practices and speed up its refunds, according to Bob Abrams. Abrams said that more than 3,000 customers had complained to his office about Raffoler Limited of Westbury, Long Island. He said the company, which does almost $200 million a year, big business, in mail order business, had misrepresented the quality of its merchandise and the value of sweepstakes prizes offered to induce sales. Many customers were kept waiting months for merchandise, he said. And you know, I think a lot of the mail order stuff that we're looking at where people are getting nothing for the money they send in reflects on Steve's attitude of contempt for the little man and woman.
Raffoler, or DME, was at the top of the Metropolitan New York Better Business Bureau's list of most complained about company for 5 years in a row. reporting thousands of complaints. More information on Steve Brown's background can be found at the website called www.whoisstevebrown.info.
When this information was publicized to the WBAI community several years ago, Brown dismissed the lawsuit by widely respected Attorney General Bob Abrams, saying Abrams had a grudge against Brown, and he claimed that the Better Business Bureau had plotted to discredit him because they represent the retail industry. He wrote, quote, "What the Better Business Bureau never revealed to the newspapers or to the public is that although the number of these complaints seems large, it was actually only a tiny percentage of the total number of orders that my firm processed, or about 0.1%, far less than that of many retail firms." But the New York Times quoted Brown's own attorney, quote, "Neil J. Mordett, the company's lawyer and spokesman, said complaints are inevitable in the low-price mail-order business. He estimated that 96% of Raffoler's orders are trouble-free. Based on 15 million shipments a year, that would mean 600,000 problems. He blames the post office for non-deliveries." Close quote. Obviously, 4% is quite different than 0.1%. The Times then cast doubt on the blame passed to the post office by quoting another mail-order businessman, writing, quote, "The industry has criticized the Postal Service for failing to deliver catalogs, but not parcels. It's one thing for the post office to throw away catalogs, but they don't throw away or steal packages," close quote, said David Hochberg, a spokesman for Lilly & Vernon, a New York company that mailed 3.6 million packages in its last fiscal year, 200,000 of them by parcel post, close quote.
Brown claims he sued the Better Business Bureau and won, but Brown's rebuttal does not address the consent decree by the Federal Trade Commission, nor the probe by the Post Office, nor the investigations and lawsuits launched by Attorney Generals of Minnesota, Kansas, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Ohio.
Direct Marketing Enterprises had planned to become publicly traded, but bad publicity resulting from exposure of the bad business practices by the Federal Trade Commission, a government agency, and a probe by the U.S. Post Office seemed to scuttle that plan. A 1986 article in Crane's Business reported, quote, "Investors apparently won't get their once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to buy stock in Direct Marketing Enterprises Limited, the Long Island mail-order company known for its low-priced, hyperbolically promoted merchandise. A planned $36 million initial public offering for the company, in the works since last year, has been postponed indefinitely, according to lawyers and underwriters involved in the deal. But it was forced to delay its offering to include in its preliminary prospectus additional information about a U.S. Postal Service probe of the company and certain financial data. An updated registration. Candidates from the Justice and Unity campaign maintain that Brown should know firsthand the discouraging impact of serious charges on the willingness of members of the public to invest in an organization such as WBAI, which relies on the support of its listeners. Again, Tibby Brooks.
And I think we have to realize that because Steve comes and says he's got a multi-billion-dollar business or whatever it is, and we don't know what we're doing, yes, we do. We want a station that reflects our values. We don't need somebody to come in and take us away. Let's keep BAI.
High-definition radio, or HD radio for short, is widely misunderstood by consumers, many of whom think the signal they get on their digital clock radio means the radio is digital, when in fact only the display and tuner are digital. The signal is not. HD radio, in contrast, is truly digital and requires a special receiver to get the signal. Currently, the price is high, $200 to $300, but falling fast. In Britain, where the transition is a few years ahead, digital radios sell for $60 and outsell ordinary radios by 30 to 1. The basic idea that Justice and Unity is promoting is this. In this picture of a FM radio band made on an oscilloscope, we can see that the radio signal is composed of a peak that is at the center of the picture. That peak is the regular signal that you receive on your FM radio. To the immediate left and right are smaller peaks, which are sideband signals, which have regular mono sound for 2 separate channels. And a little further to the left are peaks composing the high-definition radio bands labeled HD1 and HD2. These 2 peaks can be divided into 2 or 3 separate signals, one of which duplicates the regular FM signal, and the other 2 could be used for new programming channels. In the end, one could have 2 FM quality signals and 1 AM quality signal, all on this HD band. Tibby Brooks discusses the use of the bands.
One of the things I'm really excited about is Justice and Unity's proposal to use sideband radio and high-definition radio as extra stations of bands, so that we can indeed have greater and more varied programming in foreign languages, rebroadcasting programs like Democracy Now! And other really special things, not only when there's fundraising on, but at all different times of the day by utilizing sideband radio. This little radio is what's called sideband. It's $30. Put it on, you hear your regular FM station. Then you click it over a little bit more, and you hear something like in Korean or Chinese, because that's a sideband. You click it over again, and you might hear somebody talking about health foods, or you might hear just empty space, and that might be your space. Over there is high-definition radio, which costs a pretty penny now, but in England has already come down to something affordable, more like $75 for a radio, which it will be here in a couple of years. It is a good sound system. You connect digitally to your stations.
WBAI voters have until November 15th to return their ballots. For more information on the Justice and Unity campaign, go to www.justiceunity.org or call 212-591-2111. For the Battle for Progressive Media,
I'm John Riley.
And I'm Margareth Dominique. Thanks for watching.